He sat in the defendant's chair, hands folded, eyes fixed on the floor, a statue of calm in a storm of corruption. They thought he was just another drifter, another statistic they could chew up and spit out. Officer Bradley Cogan, a man who wore his badge like a crown, decided to make a point. He walked past, sneered, and delivered a vicious, unprovoked kick to the man's ribs right in the middle of the courtroom. But Cogan didn't know who he was kicking. He didn't know that the drifter was Commander Isaiah Reynolds, a decorated Navy SEAL with a skill set that makes nightmares look like daydreams. What happened in the next 3 seconds didn't just break a bone, it broke the entire system. You are about to witness the most satisfying instant karma in legal history. The air in the chaotic vastness of Courtroom 4B smelled of floor wax, stale coffee, and quiet desperation. It was a humid Tuesday in early August in the sweltering heat of Macon, Georgia. The air conditioning rattled violently in the vents above, doing little to cool the tempers flaring below. Judge Harrison Thorne sat high on the bench, looking bored. He was a man who had long ago traded his passion for justice for the comfort of a routine. He adjusted his glasses, flipping through the docket with the speed of a man who had a tea time at 3 p.m. To him, the people paraded in front of his bench weren't really people. They were file numbers, processing fees, and conviction rates. Docket number 44B, the bailiff droned, his voice monotone. State versus Isaiah Reynolds. Charges: resisting arrest, disorderly conduct, and obstruction of justice. A tall, broad-shouldered black man stood up from the defense table. Isaiah Reynolds moved with a slow, deliberate grace that most people missed. He wasn't frantic like the drug dealers who preceded him, nor was he sullen like the petty thieves. He wore a simple gray t-shirt and dark jeans. His head was shaved, and his beard was neatly trimmed, flecked with gray that hinted he was older than his smooth skin suggested. He didn't look at the gallery. He didn't look at the judge. He looked straight ahead at the great seal of the state of Georgia hanging on the back wall. Sitting a few feet away, leaning back in a chair that creaked under his weight, was Sergeant Bradley Cogan. Cogan was a legend in the Macon precinct, but for all the wrong reasons. He was built like a vending machine, square, heavy, and hard. His uniform was tight across his chest, the fabric straining against muscles built in the gym, but fueled by something uglier. He had a reputation for cleaning up the streets, a euphemism that, in his case, meant harassing anyone who didn't immediately bow to his authority. He chewed gum with an open mouth, a subtle sign of disrespect to the court that Judge Thorne conveniently ignored. "Mr. Reynolds," Judge Thorne sighed, not looking up. "You are appearing today pro se. You don't have a lawyer?" "No, Your Honor," Isaiah said. His voice was a deep baritone, steady and devoid of fear. "I will represent myself." Cogan snorted loud enough for the back row to hear. He leaned over to the rookie officer sitting next to him, Officer Timothy Halloway. "Hear that, Timmy? He's gonna represent himself, a jailhouse lawyer. This is gonna be a 5-minute roast." The incident that brought them here was trivial, a broken tail light, a stop that should have taken 10 minutes. But when Cogan had pulled Isaiah over 3 nights ago, he didn't like Isaiah's silence. He didn't like the way Isaiah kept his hands on the wheel, perfectly compliant, but utterly unimpressed. Cogan wanted fear. When he didn't get it, he escalated. He demanded a search. Isaiah refused, citing the Fourth Amendment. Cogan dragged him out of the car. Isaiah didn't fight back. He just went limp. Passive resistance, Cogan called it in the report. But then Cogan added the resisting charge to justify the bruises he'd left on Isaiah's arms. Now, in the courtroom, the dynamic was predatory. "State your case, Sergeant," the judge waved a hand. Cogan stood up, hitching his belt. He walked to the center of the floor, commanding the space. He loved this part. The storytelling. "Your Honor," Cogan began, his voice booming with practiced authority. "The defendant was stopped on I-75 for a non-functional taillight. Upon approach, I detected the odor of narcotics." Isaiah's eyes narrowed slightly. There were no narcotics. There never were. I asked the suspect to exit the vehicle, Cogan continued, pacing back and forth, making eye contact with the stenographer, playing to the crowd. He became belligerent. He squared up to me in a combat stance. I feared for my safety and the safety of the public. I had to use necessary force to subdue him. Liar, a woman whispered from the back. It was Sarah, a local legal aid intern who had been watching Cogan's cases for months. She knew the pattern, but she also knew nobody ever beat Cogan. He was the golden boy of the department, protected by the fraternal order and a DA who needed police cooperation to win re-election. Mr. Reynolds? The judge looked at Isaiah. Your response? Isaiah stood. He didn't pace. He didn't wave his arms. Your Honor, there is dash cam footage. I requested it 3 days ago. It has not been provided. Technical glitch, Cogan interrupted, smirking. Camera was on the fritz. Happens? Convenient, Isaiah said calmly. Watch your tone, boy, Cogan snapped. The courtroom went deadly silent. The racial epithet hung in the air, heavy and toxic. Judge Thorne cleared his throat, looking uncomfortable but unwilling to reprimand his star officer. Sergeant Cogan, let's keep it professional. Mr. Reynolds, without the footage, it's your word against a decorated officer's. Do you have anything else? I have the truth, Isaiah said. Cogan laughed. It was a cold, barking sound. The truth? The truth is you're lucky I didn't break your jaw on the side of that road. Cogan began to walk back to his seat. His path took him directly past the defense table where Isaiah stood. The aisle was wide enough for 2 men, but Cogan wanted to assert dominance. He veered close, invading Isaiah's personal space. Isaiah didn't flinch. He remained at attention, eyes forward. It was that lack of reaction, that absolute, stoic refusal to be intimidated, that snapped something inside Cogan. It was an insult to his ego. He couldn't let this drifter stand there looking like a soldier when he was just a suspect. As Cogan passed, he pretended to stumble. He shouted, "Watch it!" and lashed out with his right leg. It was a vicious, calculated stomp aimed directly at the side of Isaiah's knee. A joint breaker, a move designed to cripple someone for life, masked as a clumsy accident. The sound of the boot connecting wasn't the crack of bone Cogan expected. It was a dull thud against muscle. Cogan smirked, waiting for the scream, waiting for the man to crumble to the floor, clutching his leg. But Isaiah Reynolds didn't crumble. He didn't even sway. The courtroom froze. Time seemed to warp in courtroom 4B. For the spectators, the moment was a blur. 1 second, Sergeant Cogan was stomping on the defendant. The next, the world turned upside down. For Isaiah Reynolds, time slowed down to a tactical crawl. His training, drilled into him over 20 years of service in the most hostile environments on Earth, from the peaks of the Hindu Kush to the humid deltas of Nigeria, took over. The conscious mind turned off. The reptile brain, refined by the US Navy, engaged. Threat detected. Sector 4, low-line assault. Ineffective. Isaiah had shifted his weight milliseconds before Cogan's boot connected. Instead of the knee joint, Cogan hit the dense muscle of the thigh, tensed to absorb the impact. It hurt, but pain was just information to Isaiah. Cogan, realizing his victim hadn't fallen, looked down in genuine confusion. He pulled his leg back for a second strike, his face twisting into a mask of rage. "You tripped me! You son of a—" He raised his boot again. That was his mistake. Isaiah didn't punch. He didn't flail. He moved with the terrifying economy of a man who knows exactly how to dismantle the human body. As Cogan's foot left the ground, Isaiah pivoted on his left heel. His right hand shot out, not in a fist, but open-palmed. He caught Cogan's ankle in mid-air. It looked effortless, like a father catching a tossed ball. "That's enough," Isaiah said. His voice wasn't a shout. It was a command. Cogan tried to yank his leg back, but Isaiah's grip was like a steel vice. Panic flared in the cop's eyes. He had never felt strength like this. He lunged forward, trying to throw a punch to free himself. Isaiah sidestepped the clumsy haymaker, He didn't let go of the ankle. Instead, he rotated his hips and torqued Cogan's leg inward while sweeping the officer's standing leg with his own foot. Leverage, gravity, impact. Cogan spun in the air, completely horizontal for a split second, before slamming into the linoleum floor face first. The sound was sickening. A heavy, meaty slap, followed by the clatter of his duty belt, handcuffs, and baton skittering across the tiles. The entire courtroom gasped in unison. Cogan scrambled to his knees, blood dripping from his nose. He was humiliated. He reached for his holster. "I'll kill you!" he screamed, his hand fumbling for the retention strap of his Glock 17. The bailiff, a heavy-set man named Miller, was too slow to react. The rookie, Holloway, was frozen in shock. But Isaiah wasn't. Seeing the reach for the weapon, the rules of engagement shifted from self-defense to neutralization of lethal threat. Isaiah closed the distance in one step. He didn't strike Cogan. He dismantled his ability to fight. He stepped onto Cogan's right calf, pinning him to the floor, and grabbed the officer's wrist, the one reaching for the gun. With a precise twist, he applied a wrist lock known as a kotegaishi. Cogan screamed as the tendons in his wrist threatened to snap. His hand flew open, useless. "Do not reach for that weapon," Isaiah said, calmly looking down at the thrashing officer. "Stay down! Bailiff, shoot him! Shoot him now!" Judge Thorne was standing on his desk, banging his gavel so hard the head flew off. "He's assaulting an officer!" Bailiff Miller finally unholstered his taser. "Get on the ground, now!" Isaiah didn't let go of Cogan, who was now weeping in pain and rage on the floor. Isaiah looked at the bailiff. He slowly released Cogan's wrist, raised his hands in the air, and knelt. "I am complying," Isaiah said clearly. The officer attempted to use lethal force after an unprovoked physical assault on a defendant. "I neutralized the threat." "Shut up!" Cogan spat, rolling over and clutching his wrist. "He attacked me. He's crazy. Tase him." Miller hesitated. He had seen the kick. Everyone had. He had seen Cogan initiate it, and he had seen this drifter take down the department's toughest brawler in less than 3 seconds without throwing a single punch. "Cuff him!" Judge Thorne yelled, his face purple. "Contempt, assault, attempted murder of a police officer. I want him under the jail." Officer Holloway and Bailiff Miller rushed Isaiah. They slammed him into the floor, knees in his back. They were rougher than necessary, fueled by the adrenaline and the sight of their fallen brother. Isaiah didn't resist. He let them cuff him. As his cheek was pressed against the cold floor, he locked eyes with Sarah, the legal intern in the back row. She was filming with her phone, her hands shaking. "Did you get it?" Isaiah mouthed. She nodded, pale as a ghost. Cogan was helped to his feet by a clerk. He wiped the blood from his nose and limped over to where Isaiah lay pinned. Cogan's ego was shattered, and in its place was a cold, murderous desire for revenge. He leaned down, whispering so only Isaiah could hear. "You're dead. You hear me? You don't touch a cop in my town. You're never seeing the sun again." Isaiah looked up from the floor. His expression hadn't changed. It was the look of a man who had stared down warlords and terrorists. "Sergeant," Isaiah whispered back, "you have no idea what you just kicked." The doors to the courtroom burst open. 3 sheriff's deputies ran in to reinforce the arrest. They dragged Isaiah out the side door, his feet barely touching the ground. Judge Thorne sat back down, straightening his robes, trying to regain his dignity. "Court is adjourned. Clear the room, and someone wipe up that blood." He looked at the stenographer. "Strike the defendant's comments from the record. The official record will state he attacked the officer unprovoked." The stenographer hesitated. "Do it," Thorne hissed. She typed, "Defendant initiated assault." But the judge, Cogan, and the entire corrupt system of Macon had a problem. They thought they had buried the evidence. They thought they had silenced the witness. They didn't know that Sarah, the intern, had already hit upload. And they certainly didn't know that Isaiah Reynolds wasn't just a retired SEAL. He was currently an active operational consultant for the Department of Defense, and he had a scheduled check-in with his commanding officer in Washington, D.C. in exactly 2 hours. When Isaiah "Ice" Reynolds missed a check-in, the Navy didn't send a text message. They sent a search party, and God help anyone who stood in their way. The holding cell in the basement of the Macon County Courthouse was a concrete box designed to break the human spirit. It smelled of mildew, unwashed bodies, and the metallic tang of old rust. There were no windows, only a flickering fluorescent bulb caged in wire mesh that buzzed incessantly, like an angry hornet trapped in a jar. Isaiah Reynolds sat on the thin metal bench bolted to the wall. He had been stripped of his belt, shoelaces, and the dignity the court system thought it could take from him. His wrists were bruised from the handcuffs, and there was a dull ache in his shoulder where the deputies had slammed him into the door frame on the way down. But Isaiah wasn't broken. He was calculating. He sat in the lotus position, eyes closed, regulating his breathing. In for 4, hold for 4, out for 4, hold for 4, box breathing. It was the same technique he had used while waiting in a submerged submersible off the coast of North Korea, and while hiding in a spider hole in the Afghan mountains. This cell was luxury compared to those places. He checked his internal clock. It was 2:15 p.m. His check-in with his commanding officer, Admiral Sterling, was scheduled for 2 p.m. sharp. He had missed it. By now, a red light was flashing on a secure server in the Pentagon. By 2:30 p.m., a failure to report status would be logged. By 3 p.m., his GPS transponder, implanted subcutaneously in his left shoulder during his last operation, would be pinged. He just had to wait. Upstairs, in the plush, mahogany-paneled chambers of Judge Harrison Thorne, the atmosphere was far less calm. Judge Thorne poured himself a generous measure of scotch, his hand shaking slightly. Sergeant Bradley Cogan paced the room, an ice pack pressed to his swelling nose. His wrist was wrapped in an ace bandage, throbbing with a pulse of its own. "You have to bury him, Harry," Cogan growled, his voice nasally from the injury. "I want him gone. I want him in general pop at the state pen by Friday. I want him to disappear." Thorne took a gulp of the scotch. "Bradley, you kicked him. In open court. With witnesses." "Nobody saw nothing." Cogan slammed his good hand on the desk. "The bailiff knows the score. Holloway will write what I tell him to write. And the stenographer? She's a single mom. She needs this job. She's not going to contradict the official record." "What about the girl?" Thorne asked, wiping sweat from his forehead. "The legal aid intern. Sarah something. I saw her holding her phone up." Cogan froze. The rage in his eyes cooled into something sharper, deadlier. "She was filming?" "I don't know. Maybe." Cogan grabbed his radio from his belt. "Holloway, get a unit to the legal aid office. Pick up Sarah Jenkins. Bring her in for questioning. Outstanding warrants, suspicion of obstruction. I don't care, just find something. And get her phone." Sarah Jenkins was already 3 miles away, sitting in the back corner of a dusty internet cafe that smelled of burnt popcorn. Her hands were trembling so hard she could barely navigate the trackpad of her laptop. She knew she shouldn't have run. Running made you look guilty. But after seeing what Cogan tried to do to that man, and what that man did back, she knew the rules of the game had changed. This wasn't a legal battle anymore. It was a war. She had the video file open on her screen. It was shaky, but the audio was crystal clear. Crack. The sound of the boot. Thud. The sound of Cogan hitting the floor. "You have no idea what you just kicked." She took a deep breath. She logged into a burner email account she used for anonymous tips. She attached the file. In the recipient line, she didn't put the local news. The local news was owned by a conglomerate that played golf with the mayor. She didn't put the state police. They protected their own. She typed in the email address for the Justice Project, a national watchdog group based in New York with millions of followers, and copied a specific investigative journalist named Marcus Reed at the Washington Post, known for exposing police corruption. Subject: police brutality in Macon courtroom. Raw footage. She hit send. The progress bar crawled across the screen. 10%, 40%, 75%. The door of the internet cafe chimed. Sarah looked up. 2 uniformed officers walked in, scanning the room. It wasn't Kogan, but she recognized them. 90%. She lowered the lid of her laptop halfway, trying to make herself small. 99%. Sent. She slammed the laptop shut, shoved it into a tote bag, and stood up, heading for the back exit. "Hey, you!" one of the officers shouted. Sarah didn't look back. She bolted through the kitchen, past a startled cook, and out into the alleyway. She could hear the heavy boots pounding behind her. She knew the streets of Macon better than they did. She ducked under a broken fence, scrambled through a neighbor's yard, and disappeared into the humid afternoon haze. Back in the cell, the metal door groaned open. Kogan stood there, framed by the light from the hallway. He wasn't wearing his duty belt anymore, but he held a heavy, rubber-wrapped baton in his left hand. He signaled the guard to leave. The heavy door clanged shut, locking them in together. Isaiah opened his eyes. He didn't stand up. He remained in the lotus position on the bench, looking at Kogan with an unnerving mixture of pity and boredom. "You think you're tough," Kogan whispered, stepping closer. The camera in the corner of the cell had been conveniently covered with a piece of duct tape. "You think some fancy karate move makes you a man?" "I think you are in a great deal of pain, Sergeant," Isaiah said softly, "and you are looking for a way to transfer that pain to me. It won't work." Kogan laughed, a wet, gurgling sound. "Oh, it'll work. See, down here, there are no witnesses. Down here, you fell off the bench. You banged your head against the wall in a psychotic episode." Kogan raised the baton. "Bradley Kogan," Isaiah said, his voice dropping an octave. "Service number 8944 Alpha. Divorced twice. Gambling debt of $42,000. You take kickbacks from the towing company on 4th Street. Kogan froze, the baton hovering in midair. "How do you know that?" "I observe," Isaiah said. "I listen. You have a tell, Sergeant. When you lie, you touch your belt buckle. You've been touching it since you walked in." "Shut up!" Kogan swung the baton. It was a clumsy, angry swing. Isaiah caught the weapon mid-swing with his left hand, absorbing the impact in his palm. He didn't wrench it away this time. He just held it there, freezing Kogan in place. "If you strike me again," Isaiah said, locking eyes with the terrified bully, "I will not simply restrain you. I will disassemble you. And this time, I won't stop at the wrist." For the first time in his life, Bradley Kogan looked into the eyes of a man and saw absolutely no fear. Only a deep, dark abyss that promised violence on a scale he couldn't comprehend. Kogan pulled the baton back, his breathing ragged. He backed away, fumbling for the door handle. "You're a dead man," Kogan stammered, his voice cracking. "You hear me? Dead." He fled the cell, slamming the door behind him. Isaiah exhaled slowly. He checked the time in his head, said 2:45 p.m. Almost time. By 4 p.m., the video had been viewed 300,000 times. By 5 p.m., it was trending #1 on Twitter under the hashtag #MaconJustice. The raw footage was undeniable. The arrogance of the kick, the fluidity of the countermove, the sheer corruption of the judge screaming to arrest the victim. Internet sleuths had already identified Kogan. His home address, his disciplinary record, which was surprisingly hard to find, suggesting a cover-up, and photos of him at a BBQ with the district attorney were circulating on Reddit. In the district attorney's office, Beatrice Geller was having a stroke. "Who is this guy?" she screamed at her assistant, throwing a tablet across her desk. "Who is Isaiah Reynolds? I want a background check deeper than the Marianas Trench. I want to know what kindergarten he went to." "We ran him through NCIC, ma'am," the assistant stuttered. "It came back classified." "Classified? What do you mean classified? He's a drifter with a broken tail light." "No, ma'am. The file is locked. It says Department of Defense, Level 5 clearance required. It directed us to call a number at the Pentagon." Beatrice Geller felt a cold knot of dread form in her stomach. She had been the DA for 12 years. She knew how to fix a DUI for a senator's son. She knew how to bury evidence for the police union. But Level 5 clearance was a language she didn't speak. Get Judge Thorne on the phone. Tell him to deny bail. If the feds are involved, we need to keep him in custody until we can figure out a leverage angle. We charge him with domestic terrorism if we have to. Just keep him in that cell. Meanwhile, at the Macon police precinct, the phone lines were melting. Citizens from as far away as London and Tokyo were calling the desk sergeant, demanding answers. Protesters were beginning to gather on the front steps, holding signs that read, "We saw the kick," and "Free Isaiah." Officer Halloway, the rookie, was manning the front desk, looking pale. He picked up line 4. "Macon Police, please hold." "I will not hold," a crisp, authoritative voice said on the other end. "This is Captain Elias Sterling, Office of the Judge Advocate General, United States Navy. I am speaking to the watch commander." Halloway swallowed hard. The sergeant is indisposed right now. Can I take a message?" "This is not a message, son. This is a notification. You are holding a Tier 1 asset of the United States government. You have violated Article 9 of the Uniform Code of Military Justice by detaining active duty personnel without notifying his command." "Active duty?" Halloway looked at the file on the desk. "No, sir, he's unemployed. He said he does construction." "He builds things, yes," Sterling said, his voice dripping with icy sarcasm. "And he tears things down. You have exactly 30 minutes to release Commander Reynolds to my custody. If he has a single scratch on him that wasn't there yesterday, I will bring the full weight of the federal government down on your little clubhouse. Do you understand?" "I have to call the chief." "You do that. Tell him the Navy is coming, and tell him to put on his dress uniform. He's going to need it for the court-martial." The line went dead. Inside the cell, the door opened again. This time, it wasn't Cogan. It was 2 large men in orange jumpsuits, actual inmates. The guards had moved Isaiah. Cogan, realizing he couldn't beat Isaiah himself, had pulled strings to have Isaiah transferred to the general holding tank, a large room filled with 20 of the county's worst offenders on a Friday night. The strategy was simple: jailhouse justice. Let the animals take care of the problem. Isaiah stepped into the crowded tank. The smell was overpowering: urine, sweat, and aggression. The door slammed shut behind him. The chatter in the room died down. 20 pairs of eyes fixed on the new guy. He was dressed in the suicide smock they had forced him into, stripping him of his regular clothes to humiliate him. A massive man with tattoos covering his face stood up from a bench in the corner. His name was Big T, a local gang enforcer awaiting trial for aggravated assault. He cracked his knuckles. "Fresh meat," Big T grumbled. "You look like a cop, homie. You walk like a cop." Isaiah stood by the door, his back to the bars. He scanned the room. 4 exits, all locked. 20 hostiles. 3 shanks visible, 1 made from a toothbrush, 2 from sharpened spoon handles. "I'm not a cop," Isaiah said calmly. "You smell like bacon," Big T said, stepping closer. The other inmates circled around, sensing blood. "We don't like bacon in here." "I suggest you sit down," Isaiah said. "I'm having a very bad day. You do not want to be part of it." Big T laughed. He lunged, swinging a heavy fist at Isaiah's head. It was slow, so incredibly slow. Isaiah ducked under the punch, grabbed Big T's belt, and used the man's own momentum to drive him face first into the concrete wall. Big T crumbled like a wet paper bag. The room went silent again. "Anyone else?" Isaiah asked, straightening his smock. One of the men with a shank lunged. Isaiah didn't even look at him. He side-kicked the man in the solar plexus, sending him flying back into a group of 3 others, knocking them all down like bowling pins. "Listen to me," Isaiah addressed the room, his voice commanding the space just as it had in the courtroom. "I am not your enemy. The men who put us in here are the enemy. Now, I am going to sit on this bench. I am going to close my eyes, and if anyone touches me, I will break every bone in their hand. Are we clear?" The inmates looked at Big T groaning on the floor. They looked at the man gasping for air from the kick. They looked at Isaiah, who was already sitting down, closing his eyes and resuming his breathing exercises. One by one, they backed away. Some even sat down on the floor, giving him a wide berth. In the hierarchy of violence, they recognized a predator that was far above their food chain. Outside the precinct, the atmosphere shifted. The low hum of traffic was drowned out by a rhythmic thwop 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 sound approaching from the north. Protesters looked up. Police officers stepped out of the station, shading their eyes against the sun. 2 black UH-60 Black Hawk helicopters, bearing no markings other than a small Navy insignia on the tail, roared over the tree line. They didn't circle. They came in low and aggressive, hovering directly over the courthouse square, their downdraft kicking up dust and blowing the hats off the deputies. At the same time, 3 black SUVs with government plates screeched to a halt at the curb, boxing in the chief of police's car. The doors flew open. 6 men in crisp navy dress whites stepped out, followed by 4 men in tactical gear with NCIS emblazoned on their vests. Leading them was a man with silver hair and the stars of a rear admiral on his shoulders. Admiral Elias Sterling adjusted his hat, checked his watch, and marched up the steps of the Macon Police Department like he owned the building. The chief of police, a rotund man named Chief Miller, cousin to the bailiff, waddled out to meet him, sweating profusely. "Now see here," Miller shouted over the noise of the rotors. "You can't just land choppers in my city. This is a state jurisdiction." Admiral Sterling didn't stop walking. He walked right up to Chief Miller, stopping inches from his face. "Chief Miller," Sterling said, his voice cutting through the noise, "I am designating this precinct a temporary federal zone under the National Security Act. You are currently detaining a man who possesses secrets vital to the defense of this nation. If he is not produced in the lobby in 3 minutes, I will have your badge, your pension, and your freedom." "He assaulted an officer," Miller stammered. "I saw the video," Sterling said coldly, "and my JAG officers are currently filing charges against Sergeant Cogan for assault, battery, deprivation of civil rights, and falsifying a police report. Now move aside." Sterling pushed past the chief. The doors of the precinct swung open. The invasion had begun. The lobby of the Macon Police Precinct, usually a place of drowsy bureaucracy and low-level misery, had been transformed into a command center of terrified silence. The air conditioning was working overtime, but the sweat on the brows of the local officers was profuse. Rear Admiral Elias Sterling stood in the center of the room, his white uniform pristine, a stark contrast to the coffee-stained, graying linoleum. He didn't shout. He didn't need to. He radiated a kinetic energy that made the air feel thin. Flanking him were 4 NCIS agents, their hands resting casually near their sidearms, their eyes scanning every corner, every shadow, every twitching hand of the local deputies. Chief Miller was hyperventilating near the water cooler. He had tried to call the mayor, but the mayor, sensing a political nuclear winter, was remarkably unavailable. He had tried to call Judge Thorne, but the judge was currently locked in his chambers, shredding documents with the fervor of a man possessed. "Chief," Sterling said, his voice cutting through the silence like a scalpel, "my patience has a half-life, and it is rapidly decaying. Where is Commander Reynolds?" "He's in processing," Miller squeaked. "Downstairs, holding cell 4. General population." Sterling's eyes narrowed. "General population? You put a Tier 1 operator in a cage with the very criminals he likely helped put away? You put a man with classified knowledge in a room full of ears?" Sterling turned to his lead NCIS agent, Special Agent Vance. "Secure the building. No one enters, no one leaves. Cut the phone lines. If a pizza delivery boy shows up, detain him. I want this place sealed tight." "Yes, Admiral," Vance said, motioning his team to fan out. Sterling turned back to Miller. "Lead the way, Chief, and pray he hasn't been touched." The procession down to the basement was like a descent into the underworld, led by a trembling demon and followed by avenging angels. They passed the booking desk, where Officer Halloway was pretending to be very busy with a stapler. They passed the break room, where Cogan was hiding, icing his wrist and watching the security feed with growing horror. When they reached the heavy steel door of the general population tank, the noise from inside was strangely absent. Usually Gen Pop was a cacophony of shouting, cursing, and banging. Today it was silent. Chief Miller fumbled with his keys, his hands shaking so badly he dropped them twice. Sterling watched him with contempt, saying nothing. Finally the key turned. The lock disengaged with a heavy clunk. Miller swung the door open. Inside, 20 hardened criminals were pressed against the far walls, as far away from the central bench as possible. In the center of the room, wearing the humiliating, stiff paper suicide smock, sat Isaiah Reynolds. He was still in the lotus position. He looked like a monk meditating in a shark tank, where the sharks had decided to become vegetarians. Isaiah opened his eyes. He saw the white uniform. He saw the silver stars. He didn't smile, but the tension in his shoulders dropped a fraction of an inch. He stood up, the paper smock rustling. Despite the ridiculous garment, he moved with the regal bearing of a king. He snapped to attention, his bare feet slapping the concrete. "Admiral on deck," Isaiah announced, his voice echoing off the concrete walls. Sterling stepped into the cell. The smell of unwashed bodies and fear didn't seem to register with him. He walked straight to Isaiah. He didn't look at the bruises on Isaiah's arms. He looked him in the eye. "At ease, Commander," Sterling said softly. "Sir," Isaiah replied, relaxing his stance but keeping his eyes forward. "Apologies for the missed check-in. I was detained." "So I see," Sterling said, glancing around the cell. He looked at Big T, who was nursing a bloody nose in the corner. He looked at the other inmates, who were staring at the floor, terrified to make eye contact with the man who commanded the man who beat them up. "Did they compromise you?" Sterling asked, his voice low. "Negative, sir. Just light resistance. Local assets were uncooperative." Sterling nodded. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a challenge coin, a heavy brass medallion with the Navy SEAL trident on one side and the Grim Reaper on the other. He pressed it into Isaiah's hand. "Let's get you out of this dress, Commander. We have work to do." As they walked out of the cell, the inmates remained frozen. One of them, a young kid in for shoplifting, whispered, "Who is that guy?" Big T, wiping blood from his lip, whispered back, "That's the guy you don't mess with. Ever." As the group moved back toward the elevator, the door to the break room opened. Bradley Cogan stepped out. He couldn't help himself. His ego, bruised and battered, wouldn't let him hide. He had to see. He had to know why the feds were here for a drifter. He saw Isaiah walking next to the Admiral. He saw the respect the agent showed him. And for a second, the reality of what he had done crashed into him. But Cogan was a bully, and bullies double down when they are cornered. "He assaulted me!" Cogan shouted, pointing a finger at Isaiah. "Admiral or whoever you are, that man is a criminal. He attacked a police officer. You can't just take him." Sterling stopped. The entire procession stopped. Isaiah didn't look at Cogan. He looked at the wall, indifferent. Sterling turned slowly. He looked at Cogan's swollen nose, his wrapped wrist, his disheveled uniform. He looked at the name tag. B. Cogan. "Agent Vance," Sterling said calmly. "Is this the individual from the video?" "Yes, Admiral Sergeant Bradley Cogan." Sterling took 2 steps toward Cogan. Cogan flinched. "Sergeant," Sterling said, his voice deceptively polite, "do you know what a force multiplier is?" What?" Cogan stammered. "It's a military term," Sterling explained, acting like a patient teacher. "It refers to a factor that dramatically increases the effectiveness of a group. Commander Reynolds is a force multiplier. He has trained foreign armies. He has rescued hostages from strongholds you couldn't find on a map. He has served his country for 22 years with honor." Sterling leaned in close. "And you," Sterling whispered, "you are a force divider. You divide the public from the law. You divide justice from reality. You kicked a man because you thought he was weak. And now, you are going to find out exactly how strong the system can be when it decides to kick back. You can't threaten me, Kogan spat, though his voice wavered. I have rights. I have the Union. You have nothing, Sterling said. You are currently under investigation for federal civil rights violations. But that's the boring part. The fun part is that the Navy is filing a lien against your pension to cover the cost of this operation. The fuel for those helicopters, the man-hours, we're billing you, Bradley. Kogan's face went white, and, Sterling added, Agent Vance here has already secured a warrant for your locker, your vehicle, and your home computer, based on the video evidence of your arrest technique. We have reason to believe this isn't your first time falsifying a report. Sterling turned back to Isaiah. Commander, would you like to press charges for assault? Isaiah finally looked at Kogan. The gaze was heavy, filled with a profound disappointment. No, sir, Isaiah said. Kogan blinked, confused. What? I don't need to press charges, Isaiah said. The truth is heavy enough. He has to carry it now. Isaiah turned and walked into the elevator. Sterling smiled, a shark-like, predatory smile. He's more forgiving than I am, Sergeant. I'm pressing charges. The debriefing took place in the precinct's conference room, which the NCIS team had swept for bugs within 10 minutes of arrival. They found two, one under the table and one in the smoke detector, likely placed by Internal Affairs years ago and forgotten, or perhaps by Kogan himself to spy on his colleagues. Isaiah was now dressed in a spare set of tactical fatigues brought by the team. He sat at the head of the table, holding a cup of black coffee. His wrists were treated with antiseptic, his shoulder iced. Across from him sat Sarah Jenkins, the legal intern. Sterling had insisted she be brought in, not as a suspect, but as a witness. The police had tried to arrest her, but the NCIS agents had intercepted the squad car and escorted her back to the station under federal protection. She looked terrified, clutching her tote bag like a shield. Miss Jenkins, Isaiah said gently, you can relax. You aren't in trouble. She looked up at him. It was hard to reconcile the terrifying warrior from the video with this soft-spoken man. They said I obstructed justice. They lied, Isaiah said. You documented injustice. There is a difference. Because of your video, Admiral Sterling interjected, pacing the room. We have leverage. Without that footage, this would be a he said, she said situation. And in this town, the badge always wins. You saved this man's career. Possibly his life. Sarah managed a weak smile. I hate bullies. So do we, Sterling said. So do we. The door opened and Agent Vance walked in, holding a stack of papers. Admiral, we have the warrant returns from Kogan's computer. It's extensive. Summarize, Sterling commanded. Emails between Kogan and Judge Thorne discussing fee splitting on fines, Vance read. Chat logs with a local towing company regarding kickbacks for impounded vehicles, and a folder hidden in the system directory labeled Trophies. It contains body cam footage of other arrests, ones that glitched and were never submitted to evidence. The room went cold. He kept them? Sarah asked, horrified. Narcissists always keep souvenirs, Isaiah murmured. He wanted to relive the power. This is a RICO case, Sterling said, rubbing his chin. Racketeer-influenced and corrupt organizations. We're not just taking down a bad cop. We're taking down the whole precinct. Sterling turned to Isaiah. Commander, your check-in was regarding the ops plan for the Horn of Africa. We can reschedule. Right now, I need you to do something else for me. Name it, sir. I need you to testify. Not in a military court. In open court. Here, Monday morning. We're going to fast-track the arraignment. I want Judge Thorne to look you in the eye while the FBI reads him his rights. Isaiah nodded slowly. I can do that. Monday morning arrived with the subtlety of a hurricane. The story had gone national. The Washington Post article by Marcus Reed had dropped on Sunday. The Sheriff of Rot, How One Georgia Town Monetized Justice. The video of the kick had 20 million views. The hashtag #MaconJustice was now trending alongside Fire Kogan and Judge Thorne. The courthouse was besieged. Satellite trucks from CNN, Fox, and MSNBC lined the streets. Protesters chanted outside, their numbers swelling into the thousands. Inside, Courtroom 4B was packed. But the atmosphere was different today. Kogan wasn't strutting. He wasn't even in uniform. He was sitting at the defense table wearing a cheap suit that didn't fit, looking small and pale. Beside him sat a court-appointed public defender who looked like he wished he were anywhere else on earth. Judge Thorne was nowhere to be seen. In his place sat a visiting judge from Atlanta, a stern woman named Justice Weaver, appointed by the governor over the weekend to restore order. Case number 44B, the clerk announced. State versus Isaiah Reynolds. Dismissed with prejudice, the district attorney, a nervous young man filling in for Beatrice Geller, who had suddenly taken medical leave, announced quickly, the state withdraws all charges. Not so fast, Justice Weaver said, peering over her glasses. There is a cross-complaint filed by the United States Department of Justice? Yes, Your Honor. A federal prosecutor stood up. He was flanked by Admiral Sterling. The United States charges Bradley Kogan with deprivation of rights under color of law, aggravated assault, perjury, and wire fraud. We also have an indictment for Harrison Thorne for judicial misconduct and conspiracy. A gasp went through the gallery. Kogan stood up. This is a setup. You can't do this. I am the law in this town. Sit down, Mr. Kogan, Justice Weaver snapped. I won't sit down, Kogan screamed, his face turning purple. That man attacked me. He's a weapon. He's a monster. He pointed at Isaiah, who was sitting in the front row of the gallery, wearing his navy dress blue uniform, his chest heavy with ribbons, the silver star, the bronze star with valor, the purple heart. Isaiah stood up. He didn't speak to Kogan. He turned to the judge. Your Honor, Isaiah said, his voice calm, filling the room. Mr. Kogan calls me a weapon. Perhaps I am. I was forged by this country to fight enemies of freedom. I have fought in deserts and jungles. I have seen evil in many forms. He turned slowly to face Kogan. But the most dangerous enemy is not the one with a bomb strapped to his chest, Isaiah said. It is the one who wraps himself in the flag and uses a badge to hide his own darkness. You are not the law, Bradley. You are just a man who forgot that authority is a loan, not a gift. And today, the bank is calling it in. Kogan lunged. It was a desperate, foolish move. He tried to scramble over the defense table to get to Isaiah. This time, Isaiah didn't have to move. 2 U.S. Marshals were on Kogan before his feet hit the floor. They slammed him onto the table, cuffing his hands behind his back. Get off me! Kogan screamed, thrashing. Bradley Kogan, the marshal said, you are under arrest. As they dragged him out of the courtroom, kicking and screaming, the camera crews in the back captured every second. It was the perfect bookend to the video that had started it all. The man who loved to stomp on others was now being dragged out by his heels. Isaiah watched him go. He felt no joy, no triumph. Just the quiet satisfaction of a mission accomplished. Admiral Sterling leaned over. Good speech, Commander. I meant it, sir. I know. Now are you ready to get out of here? We have a plane to catch. The world has other problems. Yes, sir, Isaiah said. He turned to leave but stopped. He saw Sarah Jenkins standing near the exit. He walked over to her. Thank you, Isaiah said. For what? Sarah asked. You did all the fighting. You turned on the light, Isaiah said. Darkness cannot exist in the light. You did that. He shook her hand, turned, and walked out of the courtroom, flanking the admiral. The sea of reporters parted for them, Mafion, sensing that this was not a man to be questioned, only observed. Behind him, the gavel banged. The era of corruption in Macon was over. The cleanup was just beginning. It took 6 months for the wheels of justice to finish grinding, but when they did, They ground Bradley Cogan into dust. The federal trial was moved to Atlanta to ensure an impartial jury, though finding anyone who hadn't seen the viral video was nearly impossible. The evidence was overwhelming. The trophy folder on Cogan's computer didn't just implicate him. It was a roadmap of 5 years of systematic abuse. There were 18 other victims identified, people who had been charged with resisting arrest to cover up Cogan's brutality. On the day of the sentencing, the courtroom was silent. Cogan had lost everything. His wife had left him, taking the house and the kids. The Fraternal Order of Police had revoked his membership and issued a public statement condemning his actions to save their own skin. He stood alone, looking smaller than ever in an orange federal jumpsuit. District Judge Weaver didn't mince words. "Mr. Cogan," she said, peering down from the bench, "you treated the badge not as a shield to protect the innocent, but as a club to beat them into submission. You relied on fear. You relied on the silence of your victims. But you made a grave miscalculation. You picked a fight with a man who could not be silenced." She adjusted her glasses. "For the charge of deprivation of rights under color of law, causing bodily injury, I sentence you to 10 years. For the falsification of records, 5 years. These sentences are to run consecutively. 15 years. Federal time. No parole." Cogan's knees buckled. He looked back at the gallery, searching for a sympathetic face. He found none. He was led away in shackles, the metallic clinking sound the only eulogy for his career. Judge Harrison Thorne fared no better. The investigation revealed he had been taking kickbacks from the private probation company that the county used. He was disbarred, stripped of his pension, and sentenced to 4 years in a minimum security prison. It was a lighter sentence than Cogan's, but for a man of his ego, the loss of status was a fate worse than death. He would spend the rest of his life as a pariah, the judge who got judged. The new guard back in Macon, the air felt lighter. The Department of Justice placed the Macon Police Department under a consent decree mandating federal oversight for the next decade. Chief Miller took an early retirement, fleeing to Florida before the indictments could reach him. A new interim chief was brought in from Chicago, a no-nonsense woman named Chief Daniels, who immediately fired 6 other officers implicated in Cogan's text threads. Sarah Jenkins didn't just survive the ordeal, she thrived. The exposure she gained from the case turned her into a local hero. The Justice Project in New York offered her a full scholarship to law school. She accepted, but with a promise to return to Macon. On her last day at the legal aid clinic, she received a package. There was no return address, just a postmark from APO, Armed Forces Pacific. Inside was a simple handwritten note and a small, heavy object wrapped in velvet. The note read, "The pen is mightier than the sword, but only if you have the courage to write the truth. Keep writing. IR." She unwrapped the object. It was a challenge coin. On one side was the Navy SEAL trident. On the other, the scales of justice. Sarah gripped the coin tight. She wasn't just an intern anymore. She was a guardian, the ghost in the machine. 3,000 miles away, the night was pitch black. The wind howled across the deck of the USS Mako, an amphibious assault ship stationed off the coast of a conflict zone that wouldn't make the news for another week. The ocean sprayed mist over the flight deck, where a team of operators was gearing up. Commander Isaiah Reynolds checked his equipment. Night vision goggles, check. Suppressor, check. The weight of the gear was familiar, comforting. "Hey, Ice." Isaiah turned. It was his second in command, a younger SEAL named Miller, no relation to the bailiff. Miller was holding a tablet. "You see the news, boss? They gave that cop 15 years. The judge got 4. Isaiah paused. He looked out at the dark horizon, where the sea met the sky. He thought about the hot courtroom in Georgia. He thought about the pain in his knee that still flared up when it rained. He thought about the look in Cogan's eyes, not when he was kicking, But when he realized he had lost, justice is a slow grinder, Isaiah said quietly. Still, Miller grinned, must feel good, knowing you took down a whole corrupt department with one block. Isaiah adjusted his gloves. It wasn't the block that took them down, Miller. It was the arrogance. They thought they were untouchable. That's always the fatal error. The rotors of the Black Hawk began to spin, the whine of the engine rising to a scream. "We have a green light," the pilot's voice crackled over the comms. Isaiah Reynolds, the man who had been a drifter, a victim, and a ghost, stepped towards the helicopter. He wasn't thinking about Kogan anymore. Kogan was the past. The mission was the future. "Let's go to work," Isaiah said. He boarded the bird, disappearing into the darkness to do what he did best, protect those who couldn't protect themselves, whether they knew his name or not. In Macon, the sun was just rising over a town that was a little bit safer, a little bit cleaner, and a whole lot wiser. They had learned the hard way that you can never judge a book by its cover, and you certainly shouldn't kick it, because sometimes the book kicks back, and that, ladies and gentlemen, is the story of how a corrupt system crumbled because one bully picked on the wrong drifter. It's a powerful reminder that true strength isn't about being the loudest person in the room or having the biggest badge. True strength is about composure, truth, and the courage to stand your ground when the world tries to knock you down. Isaiah Reynolds didn't just break a hold, he broke a cycle of abuse. If you enjoyed this story of instant karma and justice served cold, please smash that like button. It really helps the channel grow. Don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell so you never miss a story. Have you ever seen a bully get instant karma in real life? Tell me your story in the comments below. I read every single one. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Stay safe.